Hello and welcome. So here I've got a controversial topic for us, which is, can I use ChatGPT or other AI to write my research grant proposal? Seems like cheating, doesn't it? Right. So the short answer to this question is there's both good news and there's some bad news. So I'll tell you both a little bit more about this to clarify this question. So why did I start exploring this? Well, I have a background as a computer scientist. I was a bioinformatics professor for a number of years, and before that, really interested in computers for all of my life. And I've been teaching people how to do better grant writing for a number of years now. And so those two questions came together in my head, which is, oh, this is interesting. Like, what can this thing, this ChatGPT and related AI do in this grant writing process, and what are its limitations? And so I started playing with it for clients' grant proposals. And what I found out is that there isn't a simple sort of one-sided answer that like, yay, this is great and it's going to change everything, or on the flip side that, oh, this is horrible. There are both some strengths and some weaknesses to this. So before we dive in, I want to make it clear that this video is not about the ethical implications of this. I'll explore those separately. So I want to say a little bit about what the AI is and is not. It is a sophisticated language model. It is not yet a replacement for your brain. I would love a replacement for my brain sometimes. So even if you want one, it's not going to replace the brain quite yet. Maybe in another 6 months or so. No. So I want to go here to some example usage to show you a little bit what interacting with it looks like. This is the interface of ChatGPT, which is really designed like any kind of chat you might have with a human. And you can ask it questions like, are you human? Okay. No, I'm not human. I'm an artificial intelligence. Okay, cool. Can you write a grant proposal? It's thinking about it. I can help you write a grant proposal. Okay, it's giving some direction about how to write the proposal. And these are great things. I actually cover some of these typical sort of grant writing tips in another video. So it's saying, I can help you draft a grant proposal. All right, so you can just talk with it and say, please write a short sonnet for me. Okay, there we have our sonnet. Simply lovely. So coming back from that example, can I ask this AI to write my grant proposal for me? Can I just sort of feed in some of my publications and whatever and say, hey, write a grant proposal for me? Well, we'll talk about the specifics of that in a moment. But first, I want to give some general considerations really about what it is in more detail. And the answer to this is sort of the AI is still dumb in many ways. I don't think it's yet at this point of writing your grant proposal for you. It's really just a rich language model trained on many, many, many examples of what good and poor language looks like and what different writers, how different writers write. And so it's sort of like a reference database that's very active and engaged with what you're trying to accomplish. It's not a replacement for thinking, because you have to do the thinking to know what it is you're shooting for in the first place. And if you don't know what you're shooting for, you're not going to get much out of it. And, you know, this is the interesting thing in grant writing, in working with people for the last, it's been like 14 years that I've worked with people on grant writing now. The big challenge that we see in clients always boils down to a challenge with thinking clarity. I mean, there are writing problems, no doubt about that, and we help people fix those. But the deeper problems, the more challenging problems are always with the thinking clarity, thinking about your research in the right way and being able to then express that. And a lot of times people think they have more clarity about the research itself than they actually do. So writing related problems are easier to fix than underlying thinking issues. I mean, neither one's super trivial to fix, but the writing problems are typically easier to fix. And what's interesting is that sometimes the writing problems stem from thinking problems. So they interrelate. And sometimes fixing writing problems can help improve thinking problems. But if you flip that around, fixing thinking problems almost always improve writing problems. So, you could always, like I've always talked to clients and said, you can hire an editor to edit grammar and the way you present your language. And, editors are pretty commonly available in lots of different places. And that's not the deeper thing. Like the deeper thing before you ever go to an editor is you have to clarify the thinking and the structure of what you're presenting and how that relates to the community you're presenting it to. That's the more challenging thing. And you can't just hire an editor for that. So the AI can help with the purely writing problems in my experience so far. It can really take something that's, that needs fixing and maybe needs an editor, and the AI can actually do sometimes a surprisingly good job at cleaning that up and presenting that in different ways that might or might not make more sense. It's a little bit random in what it does because it is a probabilistic model at the end of the day, which means that you ask it the same question and give it the same inputs. And because of the probabilistic model, you will get different answers each time out of it, or quite often you'll get off different answers anyway. So you also have to take care in what you feed into the AI. That's another big important requirement of this. Just like if you were working with a human editor, you would have to really give pretty careful description of what you want out of the editing. You don't just say like, edit this and turn it into a romance novel. No, like that would be the wrong thing, right? It would not happen. It would not land well with your grant reviewers. So remember the old adage that garbage in, garbage out. It's an important thing to remember. If you try to have the AI write for you sort of from scratch, de novo, there are both ethical implications to this, which I'll talk about separately in a different video, but there's a very big practical problem with thinking that you can do that. The AI makes stuff up. And when I had first heard this from other people I knew who were using it in different areas other than grant writing, they would say, yeah, sometimes the AI will literally just like make stuff up and it will sound very real. I mean, it sounds reasonable, but it can be highly misleading. So I just wanted to give you an example of an early case where I saw this happen. I was curious. So I introduced a number of years ago, I think it was early 2020, what's called the grant story funnel. And it was a very specific construction, a framework that I use to teach like how to construct a very good specific aims page or other front page for your grant proposal. And so, I presented this in classes and in some webinars and trainings. And I had never heard of anything called a grant story funnel specifically before that. So I asked the AI, because I was curious, do you know about this framework? And the AI said, well, the grant story funnel was developed by Dr. Joseph Barber, a researcher and consultant who specializes in the field of science communication and grant writing. And I'm like, that's weird. I've been doing this for a lot of years now, and I've never heard of Dr. Joseph Barber. And he developed this framework that's identical to mine. Talk about this idea of convergent evolution, right? And if you are familiar with this idea of convergent evolution, it's really that, two independent paths like come together somehow and produce the same things. I'm like, well, it could happen, right? So I was curious and I went and did a Google search. And in the Google search, there's no, like, if I search for Dr. Joseph Barber, science communication, there's nothing, nada, zilch. So maybe the person exists and just is surprisingly absent on Google. That could be one explanation. The other explanation is the AI literally made it up. And I would have done deeper searching, except other people told me they have seen this same thing happen. They have seen the AI make up things that sound very factual. And what's interesting, when I asked this same question of who developed the grant story funnel, that's the exact query. I didn't even put a question mark on it because I figured AI doesn't care, really. Who developed the grant story funnel? This time I got a totally different answer that said it's a concept that has been developed and adapted over time by various grant writing professionals and organizations, blah, blah, blah. Much more generic answer and probably a more correct answer. So maybe somebody did some training to try to fix the previous mistaken answer. But nonetheless, I mean, that's just like kind of weird and concerning if you're relying on the AI to come up with its own information or its own facts or its own writing de novo. Bad stuff. I just don't think it's ready to be used in that way. And even if it was ready to be used in that way, again, there are some sort of considerations ethically and the implications of that. So in any case, what I've found so far is the practical way to use it is by carefully feeding it the information you want it to use, like specific information, specific things that you want it to take into consideration and then help you express better or differently. It's pretty good at that. So you have to give it very clear and careful instructions on what it should do. And that requires some patience. I have found myself beating my head against the computer repeatedly, sometimes trying to get it to do what seems like a very simple thing to do. And I have a programming background, and sometimes it just seems so obtuse and it just won't do what you want it to do. And you have to come at it at multiple different angles to get the right query, the right instructions to really get the AI to respond. But when you find that right combination, it can do some pretty cool stuff. So here's an example that I'm going to show on the screen where I have a previous proposal of mine that I rewrote later as an example of, to try to make it better. And here I am putting it into the AI and putting just one section of that into the AI to get a further improvement of that, to clarify this message further. And here it is. All right, and here's a quick example of how you can take some text and use the ChatGPT AI to clean it up a bit. So this is from a specific aims page that was for an NIHR 21 that was triaged. And this was early in my career before I figured out how to do better proposal writing. What's interesting, this proposal, pretty good text overall, like pretty readable, but we can see what the AI can do with it. So I took this and I pasted it in and I gave it this query: rewrite the following paragraph, and then pasted this paragraph here. And this is the output of ChatGPT. The rapid adaptation of bacteria to antibiotics is a significant threat to public health, a crucial aspect of this adaptive process, and so on and so forth. It's actually, I think, a slightly more readable version of the same thing that I had written. So that's the good news. And if you take something that's much more garbled than this is not my worst example of writing. The writing wasn't so poor on this proposal. I've done worse in the past before that. But the thing about this is it did not fix the thinking problems, because ultimately this particular proposal was triaged, not because of writing problems. I mean, I could improve the writing, but really because of the deeper thinking, because of the structure of the arguments behind this, and because of the science that I was presenting and the argument I was presenting. It just was not that solid, and that's why it was triaged. The AI can't fix that, but the AI can potentially help reveal that. And so it can be pretty useful doing this kind of interaction, taking your text and plugging it in and seeing what it makes of it. You can also take something like this and say, summarize. So I could take this whole text and put it in and say, summarize this text. There we go. Okay, and then it sort of summarizes the fundamental argument, and you can see whether does that argument really make sense or not from this AI perspective. And again, you have to be careful in what you trust, but it can be useful to sort of see a summary in somebody else's words, in the AI's words, of what you've written, to see what it's gleaning from the text and what is missing from the text. So back to our presentation. So you see from the example, it can do some pretty interesting stuff in cleaning up and clarifying language and rewriting it in different ways. So I just wanted to go over the benefits that I have seen from using this so far. I think it benefits as a brainstorming tool. You can feed it your ideas and have it build on those, and that's pretty awesome. And you can, for example, feed in some of your writing from a specific aims page or some kind of front page, like a project summary for NSF, one of those, and you can ask it to write potential hooks for you, like opening sentence that's more interesting and engaging. And if you just say write an opening hook, you might get some interesting ideas. You can ask it to write 10 and you can say, okay, which of those 10 are better? And now if you give it even more precise definition of what you think a good hook is, you're going to get better answers than if you just leave it open-ended. But it does, even with an open-ended answer or query, it does a quite good job. So brainstorming tool, more quickly clarifying the writing. And again, understanding that you can clarify the writing so it sounds better using AI, but that doesn't mean the underlying ideas are better. I've often talked to my clients about this idea that sometimes when they work with us or with other people who do the kinds of things we do to help clarify the written version of their grant proposal, to write a better grant proposal, one that's more readable and more clear and more compelling, sometimes they get the opposite result of what they think. Sometimes the score doesn't get better, sometimes it gets worse. That doesn't happen super often, but it does happen. And the reason why it happens is sometimes a reviewer, when there's sort of a garbled mess that they don't really understand, they'll try to pick things out of it and they may not really understand what the proposal's actually about. And so if they understood what it's actually about from a cleaned up version, sometimes they're like, no, I actually don't like that. I don't think that's a good direction to go in for the research. And so they will actually give it a worse score when they understand more about what you're doing. So it's sort of like, previously trying to get funding through obfuscation, and then by clarifying things, sometimes you don't get the funding. So it can more quickly clarify the writing, but it's not going to fix that underlying thinking, and it's not going to necessarily make that underlying thing be a better fit for what that community, your reviewers, actually want from you. And that's what we try to focus on anyway, because that's the most important part. So it can help in structuring your writing. So if you have some free-form text, if you have even sometimes a recorded transcript, you can sometimes put it in there and have it do some interesting things to make that a little bit more structured and closer to what you might want for a grant proposal. And it can be good for iterative clarification. We are big fans over here at Grant Foundry of iterating, of the idea that you're not going to write your perfect grant proposal in one iteration. The best proposals I've seen and the ones that I've participated in and written are ones that were many, 20, 30 plus iterations. Well, this can help you iterate a little bit faster on that. And so it's an awesome tool for that. So there are some benefits for real. Now, there are some problems. And this picture highlights the problem on this particular slide. So this is an illustration by the AI called DALL-E, where you can go in and specify, I want a picture or a drawing of such and such, and it will do the same thing that the writing AI, ChatGPT, does, but it does it for illustration. So I asked it, I want a surrealist piece illustrating the problems with using ChatGPT. And I got 2 mice and some red things and a thing. Like, I have no idea what this picture is supposed to be about, but it certainly doesn't relate to what I thought I asked it to do, right? So that's my first point here, is that it's not transparent in why it gives you the answer it gives. And this is a big debate within the community, is like the lack of transparency. It was just trained on millions of examples of writing and told examples of what's good and what's bad. And it developed its own inner sort of calculus, if you will, of what works and what doesn't, combined with this probabilistic stuff. So it will give you stuff that it thinks, based on those examples, works, but might be totally unrelated to what you were thinking that you wanted. So it's not transparent. And it can make stuff up, like I said, so you have to be cautious. And understanding it's a language model. It's not a thinking model. There is, obviously there's some thinking that goes into language, so it's not like devoid of what we would call, quote, thinking, but it's not going to do the deeper thinking that you need to do about your research, about how that research fits the needs and the wants of your reviewers and your community and your own needs and your own desires to move your career and your research program forward. All of that stuff, it's not going to help you with that very much. Anyway, there's more bad news. And here is another of the illustrations that DALL-E actually did when I said I wanted a surrealist piece illustrating the problems with using ChatGPT. This is like a mask with horns coming out, and NDE. I mean, I think NDE is for near death experience. And I'm like, whoa, why is it talking about near death experiences when I'm asking about problems with using ChatGPT? Does it like kill people? I hope not. So that just illustrates more of that weird stuff. So if you use it too heavily, in the future, it may be detectable that you've been using it heavily in your proposals or wherever else. So they're working on algorithms so it is sort of watermarked. And that would be in the probabilistic distribution of words for people who are technically oriented. And it would be biased distribution so that they can detect that it's used. And funders may look for that in the future. I have no idea whether they will or won't, but they might. And so, don't become too reliant on it. I think also an interesting social consequence of this is once it's easy to write more clearly using a tool like this, at least at the surface level, then the bar is going to raise for everybody. So anybody who's not using a tool like this is going to be way out of the game, even further out of the game than they are. And the people who are using it, like, okay, if everybody's using it and the bar is higher for the clarity of the writing itself, then what is going to distinguish people from one another? What is going to distinguish the better proposals from the worse one? It's going to be the quality of underlying thinking. So that will just require people who want to have a high chance of funding to do a better job of the thinking, of the planning, of really understanding what is needed here and what will connect with their reviewers. So it's just going to raise the bar further. And for some people, that's not a fun thing. But it's the natural progression in all human endeavors, right? So, these things that I shared may seem lopsided towards the bad news. It really is a tool worth exploring. And I think it is the future, like being able to figure out how to use tools like this to help us in our work. They're not going to substitute for our thinking, at least not yet, but they can help us spend less time on things like the writing clarity and spend more time where it really counts, which is in the thinking clarity. So don't trust it for facts or thinking, but maybe trust it for clarification and structuring of writing. So back to the original question I asked, can I use ChatGPT or other AI to write my research grant proposal for NIH, NSF, DOE, DOD, CIHR, NCIRC, and so on? Well, the answer is really no. You can't use it to write from scratch. At least I don't know how to have it do that and not have all sorts of potential problems with it. But you can use it to help clarify your writing and sometimes your thinking. And if you want more help, more training, and feedback on writing more clear and fundable research proposals, especially diving more deeply into the structure of your thinking, the structure of your story that really will connect with your reviewers, then go ahead and visit us at grantfoundry.com. Again, that's grantfoundry.com. We are here to help. This is what we've been doing for quite a few years, and we're pretty good at it. All right, I'll see you soon.